It's another day in pandemic paradise, and I'm feeling grateful to be here with David Tellisman.
That's Ruben Navarrette, and if I were to read all his credentials, it would be longer than the interview itself. So here's the abridged version. Ruben is a syndicated columnist for the Washington Post Writers Group, columnist for the Daily Beast, member of the USA Today Board of Contributors, relax Republicans, Fox News commentator, fellow at the George W. Bush Institute, relax Democrats, host of Navarrette Nation podcast, author of A Darker Shade of Crimson, Odyssey of a Harvard Chicano, and he's the most widely read Latino columnist in the country. And full disclosure, Ruben is married to my dad's brother's stepdaughter, which does not make us absolutely nothing. I'm not going to explain that reference because you should know it. The point is that Ruben is family. I don't always agree with what he says or writes, and you'll see that bear out in our interview, but that's okay. Debate is healthy. Coexistence is possible without full alignment. Still, it pisses me off that he gets to live in San Diego and I'm in Illinois. The topic of our discussion is his op-ed that appeared in the West Central Tribune from earlier this month titled, COVID-19 is introducing us to someone we haven't met. All right, so let's start off with, you say that you, Ruben, need to be a better friend, a better son, a better husband, and a better father. And I'm going to quote the column, basically I'm due for an upgrade all the way around.
Right.
Aren't you being hard on yourself?
Right. So let me get to that question. First of all, what got me to that statement was that one of the things that's happening as a byproduct of being locked up, and we are taking our lockdown here pretty seriously for the last 8 weeks or so, is a lot of introspection. A lot of what I wrote in my column, the refrain from the Bruce Springsteen song, sad story, my friend, man living in his own skin, can't stand the company. So this idea that you get to know yourself and you come away with this idea that you are not that likable. There's some things about me I don't like. Some things I'm not enjoying the reunion here with myself.
So yes, you want to be better, but at your baseline, how would you rank yourself or rate yourself in all these areas?
A work in progress. I'd probably give myself a grading system. I'd probably give myself a C+.
A C+?
Yeah, a C+, because I do hold myself to a higher standard on fatherhood. Let's just take one, for instance. I think I'm a good father in some regards, but I could be a better father. I'm a good father because I take providing for my family very seriously. I'll work, up to a number of jobs to be able to do that. I think this is my main priority. I've never thought so much about food as in my entire life that I have during the pandemic, because every day I have to think, how am I going to feed my 3 kids today? Is it going to be going into the freezer, cooking something? Am we take out? What are we doing? And I have to feed them because they're not at school being fed. They're in my home being fed. So I'm attentive. I'm an attentive dad. But there are also times where I'm working, where I need to be listening. I need to ask my kid, hey, how's it going for you today? How are you doing? I need to be more emotionally supportive of that. I think there are ways in which I can be much more accessible to my kids than I have been. Sometimes I'm distracted by work, but I also wasn't raised in a house where my dad it ever occurred to my father to ask me when I was 10, 12, 14, 16 years old, hey, how you doing? How's it going? What are you worried about today? How can I make your life a little better today? Not my old man, My dad was a great dad, is a great dad, but he was so busy providing for us that it never occurred, and giving us discipline, it never occurred to him probably to sort of be my life therapist.
Does this period of quarantine, containment, and claustrophobia allow for introspection when you're really feeling it all closing in on you? Is that attainable?
Yeah, I think it's hopefully attainable, necessary. It's a positive byproduct of an otherwise difficult time. when we all go back to normal or the new normal, it may be that we can go back to our lives with our distractions. I'll be having lunch again, and I'll take my friend Ruben and put him back in, the drawer, and I won't have to deal with him anymore until the next time. So we should enjoy this period of time in terms of introspection. It's attainable, but it's not attainable easily if you're used to those distractions. And again, I think that's why some people recharge from being alone. The difference between being an introvert and an extrovert, it was recently explained to me once again, is not just I like being alone versus I like being around people. My wife's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. It has to do with where you get recharged. My wife gets recharged from being around people. Every extrovert I know, including maybe one of my daughters, I have 3 kids, 1 introvert, 1 extrovert, and 1 hybrid. And for me, the introvert in me, David, likes being alone, because when I'm alone, if the kids leave me and my wife goes camping with the kids for 2 days and it's just me and the dog and a cup of coffee on my laptop, boom.
That's my dream.
I could write you a novel, okay? Particularly as a writer, it's a solitary pursuit. It's what I do every day as a writer and journalist. And so I like that. I like recharging from that. And when I come home, I'm totally happy and recharged. So I think the introspection is attainable, but it won't come easy to some folks.
Well, I do want to take you to task on a piece from your op-ed, and I'm going to quote. So you write, "Money isn't as important as we make it out to be. There's always more opportunity around the corner, or you're standing on the wrong corner."
Yep.
So I think there are, the 33 million people who have filed for unemployment, they would beg to differ. Isn't financial ruin going to kill people too?
Yeah. So my view is, and I just wrote a follow-up column to this one on this issue of jobs and going back to work, and it came off very insensitive. I'll get criticized for being insensitive. I basically said, if you find yourself only working 40 hours a week in one job, and you love your weekends and you spend time at the shore and you like going with your family on weekends and friends and vacations and stuff, and when your boss comes to you and says, I need you to work overtime, you say, no, I've got to be with my kids, or I'll give you a chance to make some extra money, but it's going to cost you vacation time. If you're one of those Americans who says no, and you lost your one job, I have less sympathy for you than perhaps I'm told I should. Because I've lost 8 jobs, not one job, 8 jobs. I lost in 30 years of working for newspapers and media companies on radio, television. I've lost 8 jobs. And if you've noticed what's happened to media lately, if you see the layoffs at radio stations like iHeartMedia, if you see television networks that struggle, if you see that your local newspaper is shrinking, it's becoming the size of a postage stamp, you know that newspapers and media are coming on hard times, and we've had a hard time for the last 20 years. There are thousands of journalists who've been laid off and fired, and I know dozens of them personally. Nobody ever feels sympathy about those folks, but they're on the unemployment line just like everybody else. I'm here to tell you, you will survive this, because I survived it 8 times, and you're going to survive it too. And what I'm struggling with is, David, this pandemic has really taught me there are 2 kinds of people in the world, just 2. Those who lose a job and curl up in a ball in the corner and feel sorry for themselves and wait for their government stimulus check and go on unemployment and call radio shows and look for somebody to blame. And those who lose their job and then go off and create a new opportunity. For instance, we have a friend who owns a swim company, teaching kids how to swim, has a business at it, has dozens of clients, and he hasn't been able to make a single dime from it during the pandemic. He and his wife decided they love to bake, so they're baking loaves of bread and selling them, okay? There are restaurants in Los Angeles that have no business because people aren't coming into the restaurant, so they're now making takeout TV dinners, okay? TV dinners as a throwback to the old days. You get bonus points for being ingenious, having ingenuity, having creativity, having hustle, having drive. Those are the people who get ahead, the ones who get knocked down and find a way to get back up. And unfortunately, the big epiphany for me, that's not all Americans.
But isn't it binary to say there are 2 kinds of people? I don't think there are. I think there's a lot of gray. There's a lot that are in the middle, and some people will try their absolute hardest, but won't be able to come back from financial ruin. And there are, there are people in the middle who don't have the skills, who have, their family situation is such that they're so in the hole, they won't be able to care for them. And I mean, there are a lot of factors. I mean, there's also, look, mental illness plays into this, and pandemic, financial ruin, that will literally kill people. There will be suicides. There will be, there's going to be a lot of doom.
If you're talking about people who just don't have the skills, as you say, to save themselves, I'll give you one example of a relatively low-skilled job that did require courage. Instacart, the company Instacart, has made a ton of money during the pandemic because if you order from Costco.com or any number of grocery stores, it's Instacart that does the delivery. It's not your local supermarket that does delivery, it's Instacart. You pay a fee for that. There's a driver tip put into that. Instacart is hiring 300,000 people to deliver groceries, okay? I'm not talking about writing the great American novel or splitting the atom. I'm not talking about, you have to go invent the new vaccine. You have to have the mental ability to go deliver groceries. But there's a catch. A lot of people are afraid to go into grocery stores. And if you're like some people I know who deliver for Costco, you have to go there 4 times a day. Mm-hmm. So you're really increasing the chances you'll catch this. Okay?
Spread it to your family.
Right. But if you're courageous, if you're brave, and you don't mind doing it, you'll do it.
Well, but do you think that we have a societal obligation, government stimulus aside, do we have, people like you and me, do we have a societal obligation to help the people who are in the middle, to encourage, to motivate?
I think we have a societal obligation to take care of and provide for people who can't provide for themselves. We should be much more empathetic and compassionate toward people who are physically challenged, who have other difficulties that make it impossible for them to compete and provide and excel at a normal level, or I won't say normal, but a more acceptable level. But and we should do that by paying taxes and by giving to charity and helping people in our own immediate family. We don't have to look that far. We don't have to look that far. You don't have to send checks to the United Way. You can look for people in your own community and neighborhood who need help. So yeah, I'm all for that. But I don't think you can make somebody, you cannot instill in your children, let's bring it home to a nice level here. If you have kids, you cannot instill drive, hunger, motivation, purpose into that kid. That's the American dilemma.
But you can. Is some of that innate? Is it genetic? Is it epigenetic? Yes, but you can to an extent. But let me.
Comfort works against initiative. That's the headline. Comfort works against initiative.
Well, but I think also in many ways, comfort can facilitate initiative. Again, I don't think it's binary, but going back to people who are unemployed and suffering in Chicago, it was announced. This was, I think, 2 weeks ago. 1,500 restaurants in Chicago are going to shutter for good. And if you think about the restaurant owner and you think about that industry and how impossible it is to have a successful restaurant, I can't imagine what it's like for the restaurant owner who lost his or her business and now has to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and reinvent themselves. I mean, there's got to be, there has to be empathy for that person. And
But does there? Because I just told you about thousands of journalists who've lost their jobs. I'm still waiting for the telethon for the virtual concert for our journalists. There's no empathy for people at the Chicago Tribune or the Chicago Sun-Times who lost their job. People shrug and say, you became a writer. You became a journalist.
How do you know that? I have empathy for them.
Well, there's no organized sense of fundraisers or empathy for journalists. And in fact, when you go speak to local Rotary clubs, people say, well, you know, it's no wonder people lost their jobs in media because the media is so biased, or it's corrupt, or it's broken, or it lacks credibility. So again, they're blaming the victim. I just want one standard. I want one standard, which is if we care that we don't pay teachers enough in this country, then we ought to care that we don't pay journalists enough in this country. But nobody cares about that. If we care about restaurant owners who lose their job, nobody put a gun to your head and told you to open a restaurant. You chose to open a restaurant. I chose to become a journalist. I lost my job 8 times.
Pre-pandemic.
No, but the point is I lost my job. And during those times, the response was, yeah, you lost your job, but nobody forced you to become a journalist. This isn't like Great Britain. This isn't like England, 500 years ago, the son of a blacksmith has to become a blacksmith. No. You chose. My dad was a cop. My grandfather was a farm worker, and I became a journalist. Okay? There's a lot more job security in farm workers and cops than there is in journalists. But I chose that. I want people to be hustlers, to be active, to be engaged, to wake up, don't be sleeping.
Check out Ruben's recent piece, Americans Have Nothing to Fear from Fear Itself, in the Washington Post. For more information, visit RubenNavarrette.com. Next time on Another Day in Pandemic Paradise, I'll be talking with Emmy-winning executive sports producer David Lang about what an Emmy-winning executive sports producer does when there are no sports to produce, along with his outlook on the future of sports.
As a sports producer, when a transcendent story happens, and I've covered enough transcendent stories, I've slept on the floor of the station covering hurricanes where I've had to stay at the station for 3 or 4 days. Parkland, you think there was any sports for the next 2 weeks after Parkland, which was in South Florida? So I recognized right away when this happened that we're not going to be doing sports for a very long time.
In the meantime, be smart, be safe, and be well.